Justice Thomas speaks.
We're the Armed Attorneys. Today, we're going to do a justice-by-justice breakdown of the latest New York State Rifle and Pistol Association case v. Bruen that was just heard recently in the Supreme Court. And make sure to stick around to the end because we're going to give you our kind of final prediction on what we think this case is, how it's going to turn out. But before we get started, show your support for the Second Amendment by hitting that like button. And to kick us off, we have our special guest here, Nicole Schultz-Korb. She followed this case, listened to oral argument, took down some of the best notes that I've ever seen. So let's start it off with Nicole.
Thank you, Richard. Yes, one of the absolute best first points is Justice Thomas speaks, which is a rarity for Justice Thomas, and it's something we just simply cannot ignore. He starts off fresh out of the gate by actually giving a softball to the petitioners, helping the petitioners, the people who are supporting gun rights in their oral arguments by giving them easy questions to signal his support for the Second Amendment. Very rare from Justice Thomas, very wonderful to see.
Yeah, and I think, Justice Thomas is probably a vote for, right?
Absolutely, yes. One strong vote for gun rights in the Second Amendment.
Well, so next is Justice Kagan. It should be no surprise to anyone who follows these things that she is not a pro-gun justice. But what was surprising is she actually spent a lot of time burning time on both the petitioner and the respondent side, so for both parties. And it's frustrating for the people, New York State Pistol and Rifle, who went and were trying to argue their case because, she just talked and they have limited time to argue, and she took up so much of their time. And then on the other side, the side of the state of New York, the Solicitor General, the Department of Justice, she really tried to make their arguments for them and burned a lot of time there as well. So Justice Kagan gave us a lot, but she definitely gave us the very strong, assured vote of no expansion of the Second Amendment rights. This is a vote against guns, certainly.
Next up, we have Justice Alito, and he didn't speak a lot during oral arguments, and so he's kind of hard. It's tough to get into his head, but essentially his position boiled down to the racist roots of, restrictions on the Second Amendment, New York's law specifically. And so while I think he's going to be one of the most difficult people to predict in how he issues his opinion in this case, I'm going to move him leaning towards the Second Amendment being on the side of New York State Rifle and Pistol.
Yes, and one wild card that people have probably been zeroing in on, the newest member to the United States Supreme Court, is actually Justice Barrett. However, based on the questions that she asked in oral arguments, I'm not convinced that she's a wild card at all. I actually think that she was signaling support for the Second Amendment, trying to restate, hey, we have a leading case, we have Heller, let's expand on these rights, let's reaffirm our precedent, as is our duty as Supreme Court justices, and create reliable law for future people.
Yeah, next is Justice Roberts. He is, of course, our Chief Justice. And he really, I think, took us on one of the more frustrating detours for us.
Absolutely.
When we were listening. Yeah, which was this conversation about sensitive places and about being able to limit firearms in Yankee Stadium, at the NYU campus. Things that did not matter at all. Because remember, this wasn't about where you can carry guns in New York. This was about, can you get issued a permit to do it at all? Because right now they're basically telling people no, because self-defense isn't enough to get you a gun permit. So this is where we all sat around and said, they really could have used a gun lawyer, because there were lots of answers that these attorneys didn't really have. Whereas we could say, yes, these restrictions are in place all over the country. The states decide their own sensitive places, like it or not. This isn't a concern. It's not what we're talking about. And it was really surprising to see how bogged down they got. Now, Justice Roberts did actually give us a lot of good signals. He helped them distinguish between offensive use of weapons and, the defensive self-defense use. So I think at the end of the day, we are looking at a vote for the expansion of gun rights from Justice Roberts.
Absolutely.
Up next, we have Justice Breyer, and he used the tried and true kind of blood running in the streets argument. Him and Kagan were teaming up on the side of the state of New York, essentially, and most of his arguments revolved around high density populations, high crime. A lot of arguments that we see that kind of fall flat across the country because, as the attorneys for the New York Rifle and Pistol Association pointed out, we have lots of high population areas, big cities that don't have these kind of restrictions, and we just don't see this playing out. The blood running in the streets argument, we don't see it playing out. So while I know where Breyer's going to land, he's a strong against the Second Amendment. I don't think his arguments were that persuasive.
Absolutely. And, for those of us who live in Texas with constitutional carry and a license to carry, I don't know about you guys, but I have no fear whenever I leave the office or my home. Even at night, the streets look pretty clear to me.
Who do we have next, Em? Sotomayor?
Yes.
Sotomayor, yeah. So Sotomayor, again, no surprise that she would not be particularly friendly to gun rights. Really, what she did was try to find the legal avenues to restrict the Second Amendment even more than we have already. I mean, I think that in an ideal Sotomayor world, we would overturn Heller and McDonald. So she's talking about, what legal standards to apply, strict scrutiny. She's talking about, how do we take something that the court has said in the past and make a totally different decision based on essentially the societal norms and how the world is transformed. And ultimately, there is no surprise, I think, we can affirmatively say Sotomayor is a no on expanding gun rights in New York nationwide.
Absolutely. And I will say, just as firmly, thankfully, Kavanaugh really narrowed in on the constitutional rights, as a policy judgment. He reiterated, why are we asking people to show a need for a constitutional right that they should have already? Why are we asking them to allow the government to give them specifically a right that should be given to all, and to demonstrate intentional and specific need as to, well, I get my Second Amendment rights, but Emily does not. Why are we differentiating between people when they are all legal, law-abiding citizens? This makes no sense.
Lastly, we have Neil Gorsuch. He has a good track record on the Second Amendment and firearms rights, so we know where he's going to land, but what he seemed most concerned with was the administration. Whatever decision the Supreme Court makes, at the end of the day, lower courts, intermediate courts of appeals are all going to have to apply, what they formulate in their opinion at the end of the day. And my observation, Gorsuch seemed very concerned with how lower courts are going to twist and manipulate whatever standard they decide to adopt. Intermediate scrutiny, text, history, and tradition, if they do strict scrutiny. And so that's kind of where Gorsuch came out, but we know his track record. He's a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, and we can put him in favor of New York State rifle and pistol case.
Yeah, so I think we take our final tally here. Remember that in order to make an affirmative ruling, it's 5-4. We've got to have 5 justices in favor of expanding the Second Amendment in the state of New York, which hopefully is going to expand it nationwide.
Absolutely.
And so we think we have 4 definite yeses. We have 2 very likely yeses, 3 against. This is, I think, in our prediction, going to be a 6-3 ruling, expanding the 2A. So it's a very good thing. Of course, we don't have crystal balls, but man, this was such an active oral argument. I think this is I don't know, I feel pretty confident.
A landmark case, yeah, for sure.
Well, thanks for watching. If you enjoy this content, consider subscribing and hit that like bell, and help us fight the anti-2A algorithm by sharing this video.
And keep questions and comments rolling. And until next time, we're the Armed Attorneys.